Hello everyone, this is Maruku, and welcome back to What If Deku Had a Corruption Quirk. In the last part, we covered the internship arc, where Deku, Uraka, Ida, and Todoroki defeated Stain. Let's continue. The next day, Deku got out of bed, got his clothes on, and went out to go get supplies for his notebooks. He wanted to analyze what he can do with his quirk, figure out if there's more to his quirk than he realizes. As he's walking down the street, he starts to think on Stain's morals and what his views entail. He knew that Stain was a psychopath that only wanted to shed blood, only wanted to enact his corrupted ideas of justice, and had a very narrow mindset towards the heroes, only thinking about how he believed that heroes should only do it for the fact that it's the right thing to do, and that heroes shouldn't be doing it for the money. Deku, on the other hand, didn't see a problem with heroes getting paid to do good things. It's like every other profession. He thought that Stain was flawed in the way he thought. It made him question how Stain got to that position with such a corrupted view of the world. He blew it to the side and instead wanted to focus on being the best hero he can be. He got to the store and found all his supplies that he needed before heading to a nearby park to sit down and ponder what he can do with his quirk and how he can improve it. He sat down in the park on a bench in front of a nice pond with a very gentle breeze. He started to analyze exactly what he can do. He learned that if compressed, his abilities are able to become weapons that are more enhanced, more pure with the negative corrupted energy that he can create. He knows that he can basically manifest objects to use for weapons. He knows that he is able to mess with the target's point of view by injecting corruption into them. But he isn't entirely sure if that's exactly the extent to his power, or if there's a way to make it better. After spending about 30 minutes in the park analyzing, he got up, went back home, and got changed into his UA uniform. As it was getting close to the time where he needed to head to school, he got himself presentable and headed towards UA. When he got there, waiting at the front gate was Ochako and Ida. They were waiting for him to get there. He walked up and greeted both with a huge smile on his face, happy to see them. They walked with him to class, and when they got there, they took their seats and waited for Aizawa to make his announcements. He walked in the door in his yellow caterpillar sleeping bag and moved up to his desk and told the students that he hopes that their internships went well and that they were able to get some good experience out of it. The overall majority of the students seem to have been very satisfied with how their internships went. But Mr. Aizawa then silenced the class and announced that they would be taking their final exam, and this is when Mina would start to be very panicked. She was panicked because she wasn't sure if she could pass or not. He let the students know that they had about, I'll give it 3 days to study up for the final exam before they got the exam, obviously. So, they went through the rest of their day, and at the end of the day, Mina was begging for Yaoyorozu to help her to study for the final exam. Yaoyorozu was happy to oblige and offer some assistance to Mina and any of the other students that required her assistance. They all banded together in order to study. Uraraka turned to Deku and asked if he wanted to study with her for the exam, just a separate group between her, him, and the Deku squad. Deku found this idea very intriguing. He liked the idea. He thought it would be a fun little experience to have a study session over what they would be going over in the final exam. Now Deku, he's not dumb by any means. He's actually fairly smart and incredibly intelligent. So, they would head towards the living area, and both groups would congregate in separate portions of the living area of the school. They would start to study together and figure out exactly what they needed to go over and what their strengths and weaknesses were. Uraraka, she had a little bit of trouble with understanding English and world history, or hero history, as it is. Tenya, while being very smart himself, struggled more so with science. He wasn't able to properly grasp the principles of certain things. Todoroki had a problem with, I'll say, physics. And Suyu had an issue with biology. How quirks manifest inside of the body. How the body exhibits certain traits with the arrival of quirks. Now, Deku, on the other hand, he had a lot of intelligence on his side, so he knew how to help each of them in each area. So he offered his assistance to Uraraka, Ida, Suyu, and Todoroki. Now, on the other hand, on the other side of the living area, inside of UA, there was Momo, helping, I'll say, or the name I'll give, that the collective would be helping the moron squad of students who were illiterate and had no ability to properly use any of their brain cells in order to study. I'll say she had a lot of work cut out for her. But by the end of both sessions, Deku was fairly confident that the Deku squad would at least get the passing grade in order to pass the final exam. But on the other hand, they had to worry about the physical portion. They weren't 100% sure exactly what their physical would be. Now, Deku has heard rumors that it would be robots. So he encouraged the others not to overthink it because of the fact that he had heard rumors of robots being their physical. So the Deku Squad was very reassured of exactly how good they'd be able to do. Now, when the day came that their final exam would happen, they all went in and they took the test. Deku and Momo and Bakugo were able to get the highest scores in the class, with Uraraka being one of the more behind but still got a fairly good grade. In fact, most of the Deku Squad actually got very good grades. Now, the Dum Dum Squad, on the other hand, they barely passed. Like, they barely were able to squeeze into the enough points on their test in order to pass. And by the end of it, they were collapsed from mental exhaustion, even though it's just a written test. Now, after collecting the papers, Mr. Aizawa told each student to go get their hero costumes on and meet him in, I think it's called Gamma, like in training site Gamma. And obviously each student does. They go get their costumes on and meet Eraser in training field Gamma. Now, they're wondering where the robots are that they're supposedly supposed to be fighting. Now, Eraser, he looks at the students and he gets a very menacing smile on his face. He tells the students they're not going against robots. They're going against the teachers. This being followed by the fact that the UA teachers flew out of the sky and landed in front of all the students. Now, each of them got paired off into groups in order to fight each teacher. The only exception being that, obviously, Mineta is swapped with Shinso in this, so whichever group Mineta was in, Shinso will obviously be in. That being said, most of this would be going canon, except for the fact that instead of it being Deku and Bakugo versus All Might, it's Deku and Uraraka versus All Might. This was a special request from All Might, asking the teachers if he could have young Midori and young Uraraka as his students to administer a test, I'll say, in the lightest of terms. Now, all of the other matches would typically go as canon, with minor differences being, and the match between Uraraka, Deku, and All Might would commence. They would both be on the other side of the training field, walking in, trying to figure out what their plan of action would be in order to get the better hand on All Might, who is limited by those restrictive weights. Now, Deku wants to think about this logically. He doesn't want to just run in guns blazing trying to take on the symbol of peace. He wants to rationalize this and come up with a plan of attack that would get them the win. Now, as usual, the way to win is obviously either escape through the gates or take down their opponent. And this is the symbol of peace, so it's not going to be easy for them. But Uraraka She starts touching each of the equipment that she's wearing to make it weightless, to make it easier for her to move around without actually making herself entirely weightless. Now, she put in a form in order to get pieces of her costume more weighted down to where when she releases certain portions of her costume, it will make it to where her attacks do a lot more blunt force damage from the weight being released. Now, Deku, on the other hand, being that he doesn't have a lot of negative energy in the area, he is very low on power. So he's only able to access about maybe 10%. Now, as they're walking down the road inside of the fake city, they hear a very, very subtle sound of wind pressure kicking up. And from the other side of the fake city, they see a shockwave coming down at them, breaking every window in the fake city. This is the power of All Might that they're going up against. Even if he's weighted down, he's not a pushover. So this isn't going to be very easy for them. Deku, because of sucking in his own negative energy from the shock, is boosted up to 20%. His heart is racing. His blood is pumping fast. He grabs onto Uraraka and he jumps up towards one of the higher buildings in order to get out of line of sight from All Might. This is a very good strategy because if he can't see the students, then it's harder for him to know exactly what direction they may come from. So he quickly makes his way towards where Deku had taken Uraraka, and because of the weight, he's slowed down, not very much, but still slowed down enough for it to be for him to have lost them from how long it took him to get to that building that they jumped up on. Now he's looking around, trying to figure out exactly from where both have gone. He tries running towards the alleyway that the building is near, or that between the buildings. He still doesn't see them. Now, what Deku actually did was, as soon as he jumped onto the building, he quickly jumped towards the window of another, but used his corruption knives in order to very carefully cut a circle into the glass in order to make it to where not a single sound would be made from the building, and push that glass back into place before All Might could get there. Him and Uraraka are planning out their strategy again. He told Uraraka that he would like it if she tried to, how do I put this, carefully maneuver her way down the building through the stairs and tried to get towards the exit gate while he bought her some time to escape. She didn't want to leave him. She did not want to abandon him like that in worry that he would be hurt worse than what would happen if they were to both take on All Might. Deku's heart is warmed by her compassion in this situation, but he assures her that he will be okay. But as they are making their way down the building, All Might punches through most of the bottom area of the buildings, shaking them. This making it to where they became unstable. Uraraka was going to fall down a very decent flight of stairs, but Deku was able to catch her with his corrupted whips. being careful not to accidentally inject her with corruption. He pulled her towards him and carefully set her back down. He knew that All Might was going to start busting down some buildings, maybe even tearing them down in order to find both students. The chances of him now having Uraraka just carefully go towards the exit is not a viable option anymore, and he knows this. So once again, he starts to quickly go towards a broken window that was shattered when All Might had thrown his punch. Using his corruption whips, he connected to a different building, grabbed onto Uraraka, and flew out the window. Unfortunately, All Might was in the middle of coming out of the alleyway and saw Deku and immediately jumped towards them. Deku, letting go of his corruption whips and throwing Uraraka towards the building, quickly manifested his staff and blocked All Might. This throwing Deku towards a separate building and sustaining some damage. The pain that he felt in his back when he smashed into the building left cuts going into his back. It hurt. It made him angry. It made his heart pump harder. This negative energy boosted him to 28%. He jumped from the building as fast as he could, going towards All Might, this time having pulled out his sword. And as he got close to All Might, while All Might was falling, he quickly spun mid-air and swung the dulled sword into All Might's gut. This not affecting All Might very much, All Might grabs onto Deku and throws him towards the ground, making Deku smash a crater into the ground. All Might lands and walks next to Deku, grabs him and throws him again. But as Deku is flying, he quickly reorients himself to where he's able to have his center of balance back, pulls out the bow from his shoulder, and shoots a corrupted arrow towards All Might. All Might barely being able to dodge the arrow before it landed into a wall. All Might rushed towards Deku, knowing that the range advantage was now in Deku's favor. But before he could reach Deku, Deku pulled another 3 arrows out and shot them towards All Might. All Might having sustained an arrow that was dulled into his arm and into the calf of his left leg, with the third missing just barely. Now, these arrows were dulled, so they weren't going to cause immense damage, but they went in enough to where it would at least hurt. All Might quickly ripping both arrows out and throwing them down, he rushes towards Deku with a mighty smash, knocking him through 2 buildings. But then All Might realized he's only got 1 student. He needs to deal with the other. And he turns around to see that Uraraka is making her way towards the gate, and that she's almost there. With as much speed as he can, he forces One For All into his legs and shoots towards her like a missile. Just as she's about to get out the gate, he grabs her by the back of her collar and throws her back towards the city, Deku catching her in the process. This infuriated Deku, making him jump to 35%. Deku, putting Uraraka down, decided that instead of the more offensive attack, he needs to subdue All Might, restrain him more in order to give Uraka the chance to get out. Deku, pumping all the corruption into his legs, shot forward with both daggers, pulled and dulled. He started spinning towards All Might, yelling, "Corrupted drill bit!" All Might, not moving an inch, gets himself into a position to try and catch Deku. This forcing back All Might half a foot before being able to properly stop Deku. He takes Deku and smashes him into the ground, breaking a few ribs in the process. This made Deku howl in pain, feeding more into his powers, raising him to 40%. He puts his hands on the ground, spins, and knocks All Might's feet from under him before rearing his leg and kicking All Might on his left side, right where his wound would be. This making All Might spit some blood out while flying into a building. Deku quickly used his corruption whips to try and grab Uraka and fling her towards the exit. Deku knew that wouldn't take All Might out, but he had to do something in order to get Uraka out the gate and hold All Might back for as long as possible. He was able to buy Uraka enough time by throwing her, though Deku would have to be responsible for taking care of the rest of restraining All Might. Now All Might, he quickly got out of the building that he was smashed into and quickly jolted towards Uraka a second time. But Deku, using his corruptive whips, wrapped them around All Might's neck as he flies by and rips backwards, not keeping All Might from moving. All Might turns around in an attempt to subdue Deku before going after Uraka again, but Deku was able to evade each hit for as long as possible before slipping right under All Might's legs and pulling the corruption whips to the back of him again, wrapping his arms and legs tight. All Might broke free of the corruption whips and then spun around to kick Deku again, though in the process All Might made a fatal mistake. When he kicked Deku, it was towards the direction of the gate, and with the weights on All Might, he wouldn't be able to move fast enough to stop either student. Deku, wanting this to play out properly, he flew towards Uraka, grabbed her, and both of them were able to fly out the gate with the signature "Winner" popping up again on the top of the gate. All Might, having suffered a massive injury from Deku kicking him into the side where his injury was, spat some blood. He tried to hold himself together while calling for Cement Toss to come hide him from the other students who were watching from the cameras, not wanting them to have seen him in his Small Might form. Mr. Aizawa comes up to the students and congratulates each and every one of them on passing, and tells them that whether they passed the physical test or not, they were all going to go to the training camp. But that the ones that failed would have to take a makeup course while there. This upsetting Mina and the other Dodo Squad members. But the training camp wouldn't be for a couple of days. So, Deku decided to take the opportunity to, I'll say, take Uraka out for a little bit of fun, a little bit of a outing, I'll say. Now, it was the end of the day, and just as they were leaving the campus, Deku turned to Uraraka and very, very timidly, I'll say, asked her if she would want to go and hang out with him somewhere. She got a little bit more flustered at the question and said yes, that she would love to go spend time with Deku somewhere. And Deku, getting a very goofy, maniacal grin on his face, was overjoyed at the fact that she had accepted his, I'll say, offer to spend time together. Deku, having brought up the idea, asked her if she had anywhere that she's been wanting to go for a while. Uraraka, she pondered it for a second, wondering if any of the places that she wanted to go lately. While pondering this, they walked together, and that's when it struck her. She's been wanting to go look at different accessories for her hero costume, and Deku, liking the idea to go out to modify their costumes a bit, as it could also be an excuse to hang out with legitimate reasons, grabbed her by the hand and led her towards the, I think it's the support class or the support student area, and along the way they were talking about different ideas on how to improve their costumes while heading towards the mall. Deku told Uraraka that he wanted to find ways to improve his ability to manifest his quirk into different shapes. Since they were going to go to the mall after looking at the support group's area to make some requests, when they got there, the door exploded open, and out popped a girl with pink hair known as May. She laughed at how one of her newest babies had exploded. Deku is off-put by that. He did not want to be exploded. Uraraka was also very freaked out by the fact that May had exploded an entire room and is somehow unharmed, but they both submitted their ideas. Deku wanting to change up his hero costume to where it added bracers to his arms and made it to where he would be able to have padding around his body to, I'd say, supplement better armor, while Uraraka asked if she could have her costume made heavier in different areas, since it wasn't as heavy as she would like whenever they were doing the test. And she also asked if they could add a grappling hook to both of her wrist gauntlets. May and Power Loader had taken these ideas and told them that their costumes would be ready in a couple of days, or by the time that they got back from the forest training camp. Having said that, They thanked Power Loader and May and started heading towards the mall, as planned. Deku, feeling very, very bubbly about the fact that he was going to the mall with Uraraka, had tried a couple of times to hold her hand, I'll say. He was very happy that he got the chance to spend some time with her. And as he reached for her hand and gently tapped it, Uraraka had squealed just a little bit, having felt Deku touch her hand. She squeaked, and it made Deku's heart squeeze at how cute it was, and he was overjoyed at the sound she made. And he was relieved at the fact that she didn't pull her hand away in shock or show any kind of dislike to him holding her hand. This made Deku very, very happy as they walked. They went and entered a few clothing stores, having some fun looking through them and seeing exactly what they would be able to do by find Uraraka. She found a couple of adorable wristbands, some of them having little flowers on them, but while she wasn't looking, Deku saw one that had some peaches on it, some mochi, and I'll say... what is it? Broccoli. So, he examined it, and he thought very closely about how the mochi and broccoli figures were next to each other and thought it was a very cute little idea. So, he picked it up and bought it while Uraraka was still looking around, before placing the box with the bracelet into his pocket. Uraraka was looking around, and he could tell she seemed a little bit wary to express exactly how much she liked stuff, because she didn't want Deku to buy her anything, knowing exactly that if she expressed any kind of interest in it, that he would immediately want to buy it for her because of how he is. So she resolved herself to keep quiet in order to prevent Deku from spoiling her like that. Now, she wasn't aware that Deku is already preparing to spoil her with a bracelet, but he would rather keep that a surprise until later. But after that, they go into a couple of clothing stores, and Deku jokes around with her, showing her different shirts that they both agree look awful and funny at the same time. Just kinda having fun, enjoying themselves. They get a lot closer in the time where they're just talking. They're having a lot of fun, enjoying it. When they leave the mall, Deku is walking her home, and all the while, he's wondering when he should give her that bracelet of his. just as they're about to reach the door of her house, he grabs her hand and she looks at him, wondering why he grabbed her hand, before he looks up at her and she looks into his eyes, just staring at them, being transfixed by them. And that's when he reaches into his pocket and he tells her that he got this bracelet for her because it reminds him of him and her. And when she opens the box, she sees the cute little assortment of mochi and broccoli on it, and she giggles at how cute it is and how it perfectly represents the both of them. She slides it onto her wrist and is elated at having a gift from Deku. Obviously, he refuses to tell her how much it cost him, but it makes her happy knowing that he got her something so precious and adorable. She steps close to him before wrapping her arms around his shoulders and hugging him close to her, thanking him deeply for the gift. He wraps his arms around her, embracing her back with a hug, telling her that he was happy to have gotten her a gift like that. She pulled away and bid him a good night before she went into her house. Deku was elated at the fact that he was able to spend so much time with her. He went home, and we're in a time skip towards the beginning of the forest training arc. All the students are on the bus, wondering exactly what the training camp is going to be like. They pull up to a cliff where the wild pussycats are waiting for them, and Deku's kind of put off by the fact that the wild pussycats are next to a cliff instead of a camp. That's when the puzzle starts to fit together in his head. And before the wild pussycats could do anything towards throwing them off the cliff, the 1B students drive by. Deku quickly takes the opportunity to wrap his arm around Uraraka's waist and pull her very close to him, before he can very subtly feel the ground shift under his feet, him taking the opportunity to jump up into the air, as all the rest of Class 1A is basically dumped off the side of a cliff, while Deku and Uraraka are standing on top of the bus. Mr. Aizawa watches the rest of the students fall off before turning towards the bus and then taking a double take, realizing that both Uraraka and Deku are standing on the bus. And he takes a very deep breath and has an accentuated sigh as he tells Deku that he needs to go to the bottom of the cliff, where Deku then returns what Aizawa said with a, "Do you really expect me to just get dumped off a cliff by a dirt mound? That can be filthy, and Uraraka filthy. I would rather not have to deal with that right now." Aizawa looks at him and tells him he better get his butt down there before he wraps his scarf around him and throws him down there forcibly. Deku, taking the hint very, very subtly, jumps with Uraraka, still wrapped with his arm wrapped around her waist, holding her very tight to him down the cliff while using his corruption whips to slow them down. Before the rest of the class looks at him and gives him a basic what the hell look as he very gently, descends to the ground. Mina bursting out into a, well, you could have caught us too and prevented us from having to hit the ground. Deku looks at them and says, I wasn't feeling like it right now. Plus my priorities were more to keep Uraraka from hitting the ground. Mina sees what he's doing and is kind of squealing a little bit at his declaration, but is also at the same time upset that he would gladly let all of the rest of them hit the ground by being poured off the cliff. And that's when dirt golems start to form out of the ground. As I think Ragdoll yells down that, or actually Aizawa yells down that they have to get to the camp within 8 hours or they get no dinner. Deku looks at him, basically looks towards the dirt golems in front of them, looks back at Aizawa and said, bet. He told the man bet. As he walks up to the golem, which is swinging at him, barely missing him with a punch, touches its arm, and the golem is just covered in these black lines before, pulling its arm back, turning around towards the other golem, and proceeding to smash it with its fist. Class 1A is amazed, and even Uraraka is amazed at what he just did. He looks at them and tells them, this is the exact way that I beat the entrance exam. I corrupted the robots. They all breathe in a breath of astonishment at exactly how broken that ability is. Before 3 more golems come, and he strikes each of them with a corruption whip, corrupting them into his corrupted little soldiers, and tells each student to get on one of the 4 that he now has control over. And they comply, since these giant earth golems are fairly big. They're able to hold at least about 5 students each. And the golems are quickly running straight towards the camp. Now, there is the occasional very big golem that comes out, but Deku just utterly destroys it by sending his corrupted arrows towards it and having the arrows explode on contact. And they get there in about, I'll say, 4 hours, while the bus for both that the teachers were in, they have to go the long way around since it's not like a beeline towards the camp, so it takes them 5 hours to get there. As the teachers pull up, they're amazed, basically giving a what in the world look as each of the 20 students are standing there at the camp gate with a smug look on their faces, and Deku is the smuggest out of all of them. Eraser gets out of the bus and says, how the hell did you get here so fast when it took us about 4 hours or 5 hours just to get here? Deku looked at Mr. Aizawa and said, I corrupted golems to be my little pets, to basically to ride like horses all the way here. We got a straight line. You had to go the long way around. Aizawa put his hand to his face, very frustrated at the fact that Deku ability basically got them all a free ride to the camp and didn't exactly push them very hard. He was very frustrated. But being a man of his word, they still basically get to have dinner because they did get to the camp in under 8 hours. But Aizawa is very frustrated at Deku for having messed up the purpose of pushing the students pretty hard to get there. Nevertheless, the training camp is started. They basically get to have a nice, well-cooked meal and kind of get used to being in the area. And when they got and whenever they all filed up together, the Wild Wild Pussycats, all 4 of them, gathered together and basically introduced the entire team. And off to the side was a very, very tiny, pissed-off looking little boy who looked like he didn't want to be there at all and like he would rather be anywhere else. Deku walked up to the little boy, and he could just feel the malice coming off this kid, and he's like, what in the world? Well, he puts his hand out to shake the kid's hand, and as Koda rears back his hand towards punching Deku in the no-no square, Deku quickly grabs Koda by the hand, lifts him up, and says, well, that's not very nice. You should never try and punch someone there when they're just trying to be nice. Koda just kind of got his hand free and stomped off all angry. Uraraka sighed a sigh of relief that her berries didn't, or her precious berries didn't get smushed. But she said it like in a very, very subtle, like whisper, and Jiro heard it, and she's like, "What in the world did you just say?" Deku, obviously, he couldn't hear it because he was not next to her, so he basically just walked back to the group like nothing happened, while Jiro is just still staring at Uraraka like, "What did you just say?" Now, on the other hand, they all ate dinner and got prepared to go to bed, which they had separate housing. There was the girls' cabin and the boys' cabin. They all went into their respective cabins and got ready to basically go to the hot springs to bathe. As they were sitting in the hot springs, Denki was poking fun at Deku for basically being very chivalrous with Uraraka. And Deku finally dropped the cocky facade and got embarrassed at the fact that he did indeed be very chivalrous and very, I'll say, confident and straightforward with the fact that he had his arm around Uraraka and was basically treating her like a princess. So he got very embarrassed about that, and essentially that's when Mineta, he was standing next to the wall, and Deku didn't realize it until Mineta started talking, in which it was at that point that Mineta was halfway up the wall when Deku actually took notice of him, because obviously 1B is there, and Mineta got kind of kicked to 1B. And basically Deku had used his corruption whips to grab Mineta by the throat and throw him into the dirt. Utterly smashed him into the dirt. So, Deku went over and declared again, "You try that again, I'm going to rip your throat out, boy." Mineta got very, very scared and sat on his butt, promising not to do it again. from fear of Deku. Deku went back to lounging in the nice hot water, but hearing the commotion from the other side, Deku couldn't help but to try and wipe away a nosebleed as all the other girls were, let's just say, talking about each other's very, very, very gifted attributes. He basically was trying to be a gentleman about it and pretend he wasn't hearing it, but the nosebleed base of his nose from hearing it from the other side of the area was giving away that he couldn't exactly keep himself from hearing it. Nevertheless, it's the next day, and they're training. All the other ones are doing what they were doing originally during the training arc, but Deku was told that he needs to learn to control the madness in his body when he's overloaded. So, in order to help his quirk, he is tasked with taking in the negative energy of the others and keeping himself centered, keeping himself together. And every time he started to lose it, Aizawa would beat him over the head with one of those giant fans. You know what I'm talking about. And it was a very grueling process because all the negative energy from the exhaustion of the others would easily, and I mean easily, boost him up to 75%, with his topped out being 60. So he was being pushed very far. And the longer it went, the higher his percentage would go. And it was hard for him to contain it to that degree where his threshold would go higher. Now, he was able to raise the threshold up to 80%, but that's with minor effects to him. Now, on the other hand, with Uraraka and her training, not only was she having to train her zero gravity, but every 30 minutes she'd have to get out of that bubble, I think it was, and do practice like martial arts with Deku, because that's another part of his training. He needs to like keep himself centered while in the middle of battle as well. So it would be 30 minutes in the bubble for her, and then 30 minutes of hand-to-hand combat with Deku. This went on for, I think, no, it was 2 days of straight training, where they would obviously cook for themselves at night after their first day there, and then on the third day of it, they obviously did the training as usual, but at night, the 1A and 1B students obviously got the idea to do the test of bravery. And that is when the things went and took a turn for the worst. Now, in this version, Deku would obviously be paired with Uraraka for the test of courage, and the targets of the villains this time would be Deku, Bakugo, and Tokoyami. Now, before Deku and Uraraka could actually go on the test of courage trail, Deku realized that Koda wasn't there for dinner, and he asked Uraraka if she would mind staying behind and while he went to go find Koda and take him some food, and that he'd be back before they had to do their test. And Uraraka, she supported the idea. She was happy to basically to wait for him while he went to go take Koda some food. Now, this is when things would really take the turn for the worst. As Deku went up the mountain that he saw Koda go up, like for the past few days, when he wanted to be alone, he saw Koda just sitting there by himself, and he approached Koda with some food and told him that he brought some food. And Koda obviously showed malice towards Deku, not wanting him to be there. Deku sat on the edge next to Koda and asked him why he doesn't like the students of 1A so much, and why he's so cold towards them. Koda would tell Deku about his parents. He'd tell him about the hero's water hose, and Deku would remember that story of the villain having killed his parents. He could see why Koda was so angry now, why he was so frustrated with heroes. He lost both his parents to a villain because both his parents were trying to protect civilians and got into an altercation with Muscular. But Deku told Koda that a hero's job is to protect those who can't protect themselves. That it's not about putting your life at risk for stupid reasons. It's about trying to do the right thing. And Koda had a hard time understanding the concept of throwing your life away and throwing away the opportunity to basically be there with your kid just to save people. He didn't understand it. He didn't know why they did it. He couldn't bring himself to understand why they did it. Deku understood that this wasn't going to be something easy that he could just fix for Koda. So he got up, and as he looked at Koda, he told Koda that the reason he wants to be a hero is to show people that a quirk isn't evil, but it's based on the person who uses it. They can use it for good or they can use it for evil. And he tells Koda what his quirk is, and Koda is surprised that someone with such an evil quirk would want to be a hero. He had a hard time understanding that as well. But Deku told Koda that it's not about him having a villainous quirk, it's about him trying to do the right thing and help people who are in need. And Koda liked that. He could accept that Deku wanted to do the right thing, and he liked that. So he grew a liking towards Deku. He understood more why Deku was trying to be a hero, and that made Deku happy that he was able to help Koda understand a bit better why his parents left him like that for hero work. And that's when a voice came from the background. A voice that shook Deku to the core, because he didn't recognize it, but Koda seemed to recognize it. Deku turned around and saw a very big, hulking monster of a man standing there. Muscular said, "That's quite a quirk. So villainous. But it's just like he said, he's using it for his own reasons, while I use it, my quirk, to crush those beneath me. And I'm going to enjoy your screams as I crush you." Deku quickly grabbed Koda and jumped away from Muscular's punch. Deku told Koda to run to the camp as fast as he can and don't look back. But Koda was scared. He was frozen still from the fear that he felt burning through his body. Deku yelled that Koda needs to leave now, before something happens to him. The fear from Koda fueled Deku to 35%. And the rage that Deku felt towards the villain who killed this kid's parents and made him an orphan, it boosted him further towards 55%. Deku, in his anger at this villain who took lives for granted and made Koda an orphan, he pulled out 2 of his blades, and they were razor sharp like a katana. Deku fueled these knives so they became bigger, giant cleaving daggers. He leaped forward towards Muscular, and Muscular guarded with his arms, but Deku was able to slice through a couple of the layers. Before rearing his leg back and kicking Muscular into the side, Muscular told Deku that was quite the kick that he has, but that it's not enough to take him down. Deku charged forward again in order to try and give Koda enough time to escape. But Koda was still frozen there watching the scene play out in front of him. Muscular reared his arm back with a bunch of muscle fibers bulking his arm to 4 times its size before delivering a nasty punch into Deku. Deku flew back, but was able to stop himself just before going off the cliff. He used his corruption whips to essentially make it to where he was able to slingshot himself back towards Muscular, delivering one hell of a kick towards Muscular's gut. This knocked Muscular back into the mountain again, and Deku just went full force at him, boosting further and further in strength, making each hit harder than the last. Muscular laughed. "Is that the best you got, kid? Because if it is, you're not gonna take me down. If anything, I'll be the one that's taking your life instead." Before punching Deku with both arms, knocking him off the cliff, Deku used his whips to slingshot himself back up towards the top of the cliff, coming down with a nasty kick to the back of Muscular's head, before jumping high into the air and pulling out his bow, preparing 4 arrows. But before Deku could pull the bow back, Muscular jumped high into the air and delivered an astonishing blow into his gut, making Deku vomit. He broke about 4 ribs, and Deku was in immense pain. This fueled him further, boosting him to 85%. Deku was slowly losing himself to it. He was having a harder time keeping himself under control, but he knew he had to protect Koda at all costs. Muscular grabbed Deku by the foot and threw him into the ground before coming down with a mighty stomp. This made Deku spit up blood. He was starting to see things go black, and as Muscular reared all the muscles into himself, trying to slam down a giant blow to crush Deku alive, Deku used the force to drive his daggers up into Muscular's muscle, but it wasn't deep enough. That's when he felt the pressure of Muscular pressing down on him crush him even more, breaking another 2 ribs. Deku could see things going black. And that's when Koda shot water at Muscular, destroying his concentration. Deku, hearing Koda and knowing he still had to protect Koda and keep him from dying, powered himself further to 89%. No. 100%. Forcing up Muscular, pushing him back before taking in all the hate and rage, fear from Koda, anger from all those that were around him. He could feel everyone at the camp, their fear, their pain. It was all fueling him until one single blow. Corrupted world, 1,000,000% anti-hell slash. His blades grew so long, and a dark aura fed off of them, slicing through all the muscle fibers inside of Muscular, delivering a nasty slash to his abdomen. 2 long cuts spanning from his shoulders to his hips in an X formation buried themselves into Muscular, knocking him all the way into the cliff, passed out. These wounds, they would not be fatal, but they would keep Muscular from further harming anyone else. Deku took the chance to release all this evil energy into the ground, trying to bring himself back to normal as fast as possible before anything else could happen. The ground around him, it died. All the plant life around him died. It all rotted away like a poison to the landscape. Any wild grass or any kind of earth was dead at his feet. All the ground was decaying, in a sense that it was unfertile anymore. Nothing would ever grow there without a quirk to fix it. With all the energy taken out of Deku, he collapsed to his knees. Koda ran up to him and tried to get him to open his eyes. Deku was worn out. He knew he still had to get Koda back to camp. So with what little strength he had left, he grabbed Koda and quickly raced towards the camp as fast as possible. He was able, when he got to the camp, he saw Mr. Aizawa. He had severe burns from Dabi. He told Mr. Aizawa to take Koda and that the League of Villains was attacking the camp, and that he needed to go find the other students before something bad happened. Aizawa tried to stop him, but before he could even get the words out, Deku was already gone. He went through, looking at everything he could, trying to scour the entire forest for all of his classmates. He knew that the only way to protect most of them was to get rid of the villains, to basically subdue them. But by the time that he got into the forest, most of them were already taken out. Mustard, Moonfish, they were already taken out. The only ones that were left over were Toga, Compress, Spinner, and Dabi. he ran through the forest and saw Uraraka and Sue being attacked by Toga. He quickly grabbed both of them, trying to get them out of the situation as Toga was throwing her needles at a rapid pace, trying to get them to attach to all three of them. But it was in vain. She couldn't keep up with how fast Deku was. He was trying to get them all back to the camp building, but in his attempt to try and help the others, Tokoyami was taken. And he learned that because of from Muscular, while they were fighting, that all three of them were the targets. So he knew he had to get to Tokoyami and Bakugo as fast as possible. After dropping off Uraraka and Sue, he raced back in, trying to find any kind of sign of them. He saw Tokoyami in the distance disappear, like with a blue flash, and he ran that direction as fast as he could, his body giving out on him. By the time that he was able to reach to the area where the blue flashes were coming from, a portal was there, and he could see Mr. Compress and Dobby barely walking through the portal. He shot his black whips out as fast as possible, trying to get to them. And just as he got through the portal, or got to the portal, it closed behind him, with him having ripped Tokoyami from Mr. Compress's hands and trying to get to Bakugo. Now he was stuck in the League of Villains base with Bakugo. He was glad that he was able to get Todoroki out, but he was caught instead. They were able to heal him from all his wounds, but they wanted to see if they could manage to get both Bakugo and Deku to join the League of Villains. Things were going to play very nicely from there. And that's where I'm ending part 5 of What If Deku Had a Corruption Quirk.